Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Kevin Kearns. I'm the director of the Johnson Institute for Responsible Leadership in the Graduate School of Public and International Affairs. The mission of the Johnson Institute is to promote effective leadership in public service, both in pre-service context with graduate students who are preparing for careers in leadership, and we also do a good bit of executive development work and training with people who are already engaged in this type of work. Today we are here for a very special occasion, which I'll turn to in just a moment, but there are several people I'd really like to thank before we move forward. First and foremost, although in absentia, I want to thank LaVon Johnson. LaVon and the late Glenn Johnson have been steadfast supporters of the Johnson Institute for the past 20 years almost. And our partnership has been one that I've cherished. It's been one of the highlights of my personal career and life. And we have Miles Wallace is here with us representing the Johnson family. Miles, I'm delighted to have you here. We have several of our advisory board members. I'm kind of looking out in the audience. Andy, Ned, would advisory board members please stand up as well and just be recognized? Andy, Ned, Kathy, John Keeler, many, many others who are part of the Johnson Institute governing structure. I'm always thankful to Dean John Keeler for the support that he's provided the Johnson Institute over the years and in helping us in so many ways, tangibly and intangibly. And lastly, I want to thank Lydia McShane. Lydia is walking up to my left, your right. Lydia is in many ways the heart and soul of the Johnson Institute, and not much happens in this place without Lydia's help. So Lydia, thank you so very, very much. We're here today to give our Exemplary Leader Award. It's an award we give once a year, and this is our 10th year, so this is a rather important milestone in that activity. The Exemplary Leader Award goes to someone every year who exemplifies the values, behaviors, philosophies of outstanding leadership, values of accountability, values of ethics, values of concern for people. And our award winner today is a person who exemplifies all of those, but again, I'm going to come to Paul in just a moment. We have honored over the past 10 years a number of people who are eclectic in their interests and their backgrounds. We've honored people who have led in context of disaster management. We have honored people who have led in context of social entrepreneurship. We have honored people who have led in international peace building. In fact, our dean in the back of the room likes to say that GSPIA's motto is local to global. And I would have to say that in our case, the Johnson Institute and its Exemplary Leader Award has very definitely awarded a local to global. I'm pleased to say that an award winner from 2 years ago, 2015, Search for Common Cause, is an organization that's recently been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. So we were a little bit ahead of the curve on that one, which I feel very, very proud of. We also write case studies about these leaders, extensive case studies. They're case studies that are used as teaching tools in classrooms, not biographical sketches, not celebratory biographies, but actually problem-focused case studies. And our students who work with us are co-authors on those, and we're really, really happy to have those. So today's award winner really embodies local to global, because Secretary Paul O'Neill's career has spanned all of those geographic boundaries, but also sectoral boundaries. Paul was born in St. Louis and spent a large part of his time, however, in Anchorage, Alaska, where he met his lovely wife, Nancy, who's here sitting next to him, and we welcome Nancy and his daughter as well. You met at Anchorage High School, as I understand it, and I believe Paul once told me, and Paul, I probably should have confirmed this with you a little bit earlier today, that Actually, after high school, college wasn't on your immediate radar, that you worked for a while and worked actually in laboring jobs. But even in these positions, it wasn't long at all before people noticed his knack for detail, his knack for systems analysis, and his innate curiosity that demanded of him, wherever he worked, how can we make it work better? Why do we do it this way? What assumptions can we challenge? When he did have the opportunity for higher education, he chose California State University in Fresno, where he studied economics, and he also studied economics at the Claremont Graduate School. Now, for the students here present, however, I want to make special emphasis that Secretary Paul O'Neill has a Master of Public Administration from Indiana University, not a Master of Business Administration, MPA. So those of you in the MPA program can certainly look to Secretary O'Neill for inspiration as well. He began work in the federal sector as a computer systems analyst with the Veterans Administration, moved over to the Office of Management and Budget, where he served as Deputy Director of the U.S. Office of Management and Budget from 1974 to 1977. And he may tell you about the drive for public service that brought him to Washington when he gives his remarks in a few minutes. He then joined the private sector with International Paper, where he served as VP and then finally president from 1985 to 1987, and then served as chairman and CEO of ALCOA from 1987 to 1999, and he retired as chairman in 2000. Now, this is where this story gets quite interesting, because at ALCOA, the primary metric that Mr. O'Neill used to measure performance was not market share, was not profitability, was not return on investment. It was safety. It was protecting workers and providing an environment that would make ALCOA among the safest places to work in the world. And a number of other values drove him during that leadership assignment that he will say drove some peers crazy, because he was using very, very different kinds of metrics of success and challenging assumptions. Excuse me. But his orientation was always, if one takes care of people, performance takes care of itself, and especially the financial performance. He drove ALCOA, led ALCOA to become not only one of the safest workplaces, but increased its market value by more than 800%. Today, ALCOA operates across more than 40 countries, and the lost workday rate is 20 times lower than the average rate for American hospitals, which is astonishing. He then answered the call for public service and became the 72nd Secretary of the U.S. Treasury, serving for about 23 months from 2001 to 2002. There, he courageously expressed opinions about the administration's economic policies, tax policies, and military intervention policies, and again set a precedent for candor and honesty in that administration. He left there and since then has been deeply, deeply involved, and by the way, he was one of 8 former Treasury secretaries who called on the United Kingdom to remain a member of the European Union ahead of their June 2016 referendum. But today, Paul says he's not finished. Despite an illustrious career that has spanned public, private, nonprofit work, one of the students asked him, why do you keep working at this? You could do so many other things. You could relax, you could do this, you could travel. He says, there are several questions that still keep me up at night. One is why we still lose millions of lives every year in hospitals to infections. Why we lose thousands of lives in hospitals to medical errors. Not medical malpractice, mind you, medical errors. Infections, yes, but also incorrect processing of paperwork, poor communication between medical health teams, and so on. And so for the past number of years, he's been applying his just remarkable skills in systems analysis. He's a founder of an organization called Value Capture, and he provides counsel and support to healthcare executives and policymakers around this idea. He's been extensively involved in public service, having chaired the board of the RAND Corporation and served on the board member of more than a dozen other major organizations. Paul's work has inspired others. I'm happy to see that Dr. Karen Feinstein is here today because along with Paul and her staff at the Jewish Healthcare Foundation, she has created the Pittsburgh Regional Health Initiative to address, again, many of the quality issues in our own local healthcare system. He's also an exemplar for others, and I'm really happy to see Bill O'Rourke here today too, because in an email a couple of days ago, Bill, I hope you don't mind if I quote you, he says, "I couldn't be more delighted. In my mind, Paul O'Neill is the most exemplary leader I have ever known." And he also affects others that he may not even know he affects. A couple of days ago, I received an email from a student who could not be here today. She's actually working in Harrisburg. She says, and I quote, "I'm so jealous that I'm not in Pittsburgh and unable to attend the Leadership Awards ceremony on Friday. My father worked for ALCOA for 30 years. He has since passed, but was so proud of his work and his career with ALCOA. It would have been an honor to shake the hand of the leader who had such a profound impact on my family." And that says so much about Paul O'Neill. Now, I also want to say that Paul gives freely of his time, and he's been a great friend of the Johnson Institute. Every year for the past few years, Paul has come and addressed students who participate in a special leadership development program. He sits on the side of a desk and talks about his career, and talks about some of the decisions he's made, and talks about some of the values that he holds dear. And sometimes he concludes with a very, very humble assessment in his characteristic way. He'll say something like, and I'm paraphrasing Paul, "My career wasn't planned. I just responded to opportunities. I was in the right place at the right time. I guess I just got lucky." Now, last year, a student sitting in the room responded very appropriately. She said, "Mr. Secretary, with due respect, it's pretty clear to all of us that luck had nothing to do with it. It was your competence, your performance, your passion for work." And Paul, I have to agree, wherever you have gone, whatever you have done, from your post-high school laboring work to the world stage as CEO and Treasury Secretary, you've made a difference, not only in the organizations that you have led, but in the people who are the heart and soul of those organizations. You've put people first, in the firm conviction that a safe, welcoming, resourceful, equitable, and diverse environment will result in a better product and a better world. Paul, we just simply could not be more pleased to award you the 2018 Exemplary Leader Award from the Johnson Institute for Responsible Leadership. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you.
Couldn't be happier. Wow. We present to our award winners, and I must be very careful not to drop this, a globe symbolic of GSPIA's local to global focus. And we also have a certificate for you, Paul, as well, which I won't take out of its envelope, but I do hope that you will display that with pride, and we certainly will display your photo with pride in our hallways. So
Thank you very much.
Again.
Thank you, Kevin. So I've been talking most of the day. I'm going to open up the water because I may need it. I'm getting feedback. Kevin, thank you very much for your kind words. I said earlier today, and I guess I want to say to all of you as well, you know, there's some hesitation in accepting this kind of award, because for me it feels pretentious, and that's not who I am. But I do appreciate the recognition and the kind words. So I'm going to start with something that Kevin said. I do still have lots of engagement with universities and young people because I still want to take advantage of every opportunity I have to convince young people particularly that they don't have to and they shouldn't be willing to accept the world the way it is. Because I think too often the older people get, the more they believe that what exists is inevitable and we can't do anything about it. I don't think that's right. But we need more people who are straining at the leash of what other people find personally reprehensible or subpar compared to what it could be, to empower them and enable them to show the way to a better future. So, you know, again, it's a little pretentious to suggest you know a whole lot about leadership, but I do have ideas that I have collected and acted on over the last, I guess I'll admit, the 75 years worth of conscious thinking about it. That I want to share with you. I believe leadership, in the sense that I mean real leadership, has specific content. It's not a happy talk. It's not about we wish the world were this way. It's about what I believe are essential responsibilities of a real leader, beginning with this. I believe a real leader, and you know, so I'm talking expansively, you know, an organization of more than 2 people. The real leader is responsible for articulating what I call aspirational goals. And so aspirational goals, again, mean something very specific to me, and that is about human beings. And it's on the first day I arrived at ALCOA on June the 15th of 1987. I should have brought it today. In the 3 months before I came to ALCOA, after I indicated I was going to accept the appointment, after I left International Paper, I spent 3 months thinking about this question and eventually writing on an 8.5 by 11 tablet paper the answer to this question. When you leave here, what do you want to be remembered for? And so at the top of my page, I wrote safety. Now, why did I write safety? Because, again, this is lifetime learning. Human beings are not able to fully contribute if they're not well, if they're hurt at work. They can't, no matter what their will is, they can't do it. And so I believe the essence of organizations with the potential for habitual excellence start with the recognition that it's about every human being in the organization. And the most critical thing, actually a precondition, should be in every organization by me, an aspirational goal stated by the maximum leader, whoever that is, that we will be an injury-free workplace. All right, so that's the headline. But it doesn't end with a headline. It's the beginning of an action agenda every day. Right? And again, it has specific content for the leader, because if you think about it, people need education and training to understand their work environment. And it's interesting, some people think this only applies in manufacturing industry. Believe me, it applies in every kind of a workplace. Injuries happen to people. In a great workplace, the injury rates are a fraction of the national averages, because a leader has not only declared the aspiration, but has taken the steps that are necessary so that every person in the organization owns the goal. It's not the chairman's goal. It's not the leader's goal. It needs to be the aspiration of the organization. And so if you're going to have an injury-free workplace, everyone needs to have a paddle. Otherwise, you're not going anywhere. Okay? And in order for people to have what they need to be a participant in pursuing this goal, they need training and education. You need to know, don't touch that pipe, it's hot, and here are the reasons why. And you know, it sounds silly, but it's about everything. And again, in an office environment, it's about don't leave the sliding drawer out on the filing cabinet, because the next person comes by looking at their iPhone is going to trip over that and at least scrape their ankle, maybe break a bone, right? And so it is truly about everything. If you want to have an organization with an inclination toward habitual excellence, it needs to begin with aspirational objectives that are worthy of human beings. All right. So I spent a lot of time thinking about this and acting on it in my various leadership jobs. And so I've reduced how to think about this to some questions. So I believe in an organization with the potential for habitual excellence, the leader will have created a culture, I know that's a nasty word, a culture which describes the interactions between and among people in an organization and their audiences inside and outside, that describes the organization every day, and people can answer yes to 3 questions every day without any reservation. So here's the first question a great leader needs to create a no hesitation positive answer to. Everyone can say every day, I'm treated every day with dignity and respect by everyone I encounter, without regard to my rank or my educational attainment or my gender or my race or any other discriminating characteristic. I can say I am treated with an equal measure of dignity and respect every day without any qualifiers. So I have to tell you, there are not many organizations where people can make that claim, which is a shame, because it's disabling and it's wrong, and it actually makes it virtually impossible to be habitually excellent if you can't pass that first test. So let me do this in a context of the environment I spend a lot of time working in these days, in a hospital environment. So in a typical hospital, people at the top of the ladder, i.e. brain surgeons and other people with all that great training, are treated differentially from the people who clean the rooms. Now, you may be thinking in your head, well, you know, that's probably appropriate. They've got all the skill and training. But you need to know this, that the people who clean the rooms, if they don't do their job with habitual excellence and get all the bacteria out between patients or even during a patient's stay. The bacteria that they didn't clean up can kill you no matter how good the work of the surgeon was. So should those people be accorded dignity and respect for what they do? So here's another important aspect of the role for the leader. The leader needs to make sure, if it isn't patently obvious to people, why they're important. You know, so I had a rule when I was at ALCOA: if you're here, you're important. If you're here and you're not important, we made a mistake, right? And so if we brought you in here, which was a willful act, we have a responsibility to you, and it begins treating you with dignity and respect, because if you weren't here, we wouldn't be able to do our job. No matter what it is, no matter what the intellectual content is, if you're here, you're important, and you're a human being, and we want you to be part of a population that owns the responsibility for an injury-free workplace. So maybe you know some organizations that can pass the first question. So if you do, here's the second question, which in a way is even harder. The second question is, you can say every day, I'm giving you things I need: training, education, financial support, so that I can make a contribution to this organization that gives meaning to my life. Okay, so it's not about extracting something from the human resources. It's about empowering them to make a contribution that gives meaning to their life. Now, I have to tell you, I don't know of a lot of organizations where the leader believes that it's their responsibility to create the conditions so that every person there can say, what I do here matters and it gives meaning to my life. In so many organizations, people wait for the weekend so they can do things that give them meaning in their life because they don't get it at work. That's awful, because we spend so much of our time at work. And there's no reason it has to be a null. In fact, there is a reason why it needs to be consistent with getting meaning in your life. So if you get by those two questions, the third question is also important. The third question is, people can say, I'm recognized for what I do by someone whose opinion I care about. That maybe sounds easy, but you know, again, there are not a lot of organizations where people are given on a regular basis, every day, meaningful recognition. So let me go back to my hospital setting. What's meaningful recognition? When you go off the ward at night after a shift, and the nurse at the administrative desk says to you, nice job today. That's meaningful recognition. So unfortunately, you know, we all have these, or many places have these human resource departments, and they know recognition is important, and so they make a list from time to time of 25 or 30 people, and they all get together in a cafeteria between feeding periods, and somebody who can't pronounce your name reads your name off a list, and that's supposed to be recognition. That's not recognition in the sense I mean it, but it is really a necessary component of an organization that has the potential for habitual excellence, to have these cultural characteristics that only a leader can provide in an organization. Now, I have to tell you, there are special circumstances where these things are really important. So if you're parachuted into an organization like I was at ALCOA, after you've been there a little while, you own the culture as it is. And so it is really important for a new leader to stake out the value boundaries in an organization. So if there's latent discrimination in your organization, After you've been there for a month, you own it. And you have to deliberately decide it's not going to be while I'm here. And then you have to take meaningful action. Again, it's not about writing headlines in the sky. It's about taking meaningful action to create a different reality for people in an organization. Because what actually goes on is your culture, not the fancy words you write in annual reports. And you know, here's another thing most of you would know, but we don't act on often enough. There are no secrets in an organization, especially the things you wish people didn't know. They know. They know it all. And so, you know, when I was privileged to be parachuted into ALCOA, I had made this list with safety at the top, and everything under that really boiled down to, it's, you know, pretty full page of script, boiled down to different ways of saying, we're going to be the best in the world at everything we do. Full stop. We're not going to be better than yesterday. We've got our eyes set on the stars, and our star is best in the world at everything we do. And then you have to give meaning to that idea. You know, so this was not like an overnight journey. This was piece by piece, figuring out ways to give meaning to what I was pretty sure were the right signposts for what a great organization would look like. And so I give you an illustration. I guess I give you a couple of illustrations, and they're both centered around a person who's become a lifelong friend to me. His name is Ernie Edwards. He was at ALCOA when I got there. He happens to be a black person. He was a controller at ALCOA. And the first week I was at ALCOA, my secretary came in, my assistant came in and said, Mr. O'Neill, you need to sign these papers. And I said, I don't sign things I haven't read. What is it? So she said, this is your application to be a member of the Laurel Valley Country Club down in Ligonier. And I said, you know, Linda, I'm new to the aluminum business. I got a lot to learn. I'm not going to be driving 50 miles to play golf. Thank you very much. And so I don't want to belong to this club. So she was obviously disappointed. She came back in about 15 minutes and said to me, she'd talked to the person who was the president of ALCOA at the time. And he said, tell him he has to sign these papers because this is a place that's owned by the 10 biggest companies in Pittsburgh, ALCOA being one. And the bylaws require, before anybody else from the company can belong, the CEO has to belong, so you have to belong. Because our sales and marketing people entertain the CEO of Boeing and Anheuser-Busch and all these other important customers and suppliers. So whether you use it or not, you need to belong. So I said, okay, Linda, ask Bob Reed, who was the corporate secretary at the time, ask Bob to come in for a minute. So Bob came in, and I said to him, Bob, I would like to see the certification from Laurel Valley that they're an open membership club and they don't discriminate in any way. So Bob said, we don't have certifications here. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, we just don't do that. So I said, I'm not going to go to lunch today. I'm going to write a new policy for all of ALCOA, which basically says ALCOA will no longer utilize, participate in, or in any other way be involved with places that don't have open membership and everyone isn't welcome. And so pretty soon the president came in and he said, are you sure you want this to be your first action in ALCOA? And so I said to him, you know, for me, this is a violation of my value calculus. So if I don't act on it now, what excuse will I use later on to raise the subject? So I got to do something about it. Now that I know it's a problem, I have to act. And so he said, let me set up a lunch so you can explain your thinking to the rest of the CEOs in town. So he set up a lunch at the Duquesne Club. And I told them what I was going to do, and one of the CEOs said to me, "You're abusing your authority." And I said, you know, I worked a long time. At this point, I was 50 years old. I said, I worked a long time to have authority that was worth abusing. And if this is abuse, I'm doing it. And so they contacted Laurel Valley and said, you need to give O'Neill a certification. And I said, fine. And then I said, before I will join and be on your membership register, you have to elect my corporate controller as a member of your club, which they did. You know what? They didn't know it at the time, but it was good for them. But it was also really important to staking out the cultural dimensions of what ALCOA stood for as an organizational entity of significance in this community, that we're not going to be a party to stuff that's gone on forever simply because it's gone on forever. We're going to stake out there, and we're not just going to do happy talk, we're going to take meaningful action. And if it makes other people uncomfortable, that's okay. All right, so the other story about Ernie is this notion of habitually excellent. So after we've been working on this across the domains of ALCOA for a couple of years, I said to Ernie one day, Ernie, I'd like to know, right now we're closing our books fully audited. That's a big deal in big corporations with operations in 340 locations in 43 countries, closing the books accurately and audited. It's a big deal. And so it was taking us 10 or 12 days to close our books every month. So I said to Ernie, I'd like to know if we closed our books perfectly in the least amount of time, how long would it take? So he said, you know, it'll take us a little stay. He came back in about 3 weeks and he said, I haven't answered your question. The answer is 2.5 days. So I said, great, that should be our goal. And Ernie said, I didn't mean we can do it. I said, no. Ernie, you know that stuff about best in the world at everything we can do? If it is possible to close our books accurately in 2.5 days in this worldwide organization, that's what we should do. That's what best in the world means. And he was reluctant, but I gave him a long license to do everything over. So in those days, ALCOA was a pioneer in using information technology. We owned one of every kind of electronic device that had ever been manufactured, which means we couldn't talk to each other. You know, it was a nightmare trying to do any kind of communication, let alone financial communication. So I said, Ernie, we need to clean up this act. I tell you the sticky point, the lawyers didn't want to give up their platforms that were incompatible with everything else. So I had to roll over a few people who didn't believe compatibility was essential. But we did, and here's a happy thing. In 12 months, ALCOA learned how to close its books, fully audited, with no errors, by reimagining how to do this process that empowered the people. So in those days, we had 1,300 people in the financial function all over the world. You know what? The collateral and more important benefit of this whole thing is that ever after, every month, when the books were closed, 1,300 financial people were busting their buttons with pride. And they had evidence. You know, we reported our results quarterly, but they had evidence. We don't just say we're the best in the world, we are the best in the world. And you know what? The boss didn't create it. We created it. We were just given the power to use our brains to create something no one else could even imagine. That's what I meant about best in the world at everything we do. And literally, you know, Kevin told you the 800% increase in value. It was because that same idea about habitual excellence became the mantra of the organization. And the people owned it. It wasn't mine. The people owned it because it was so rewarding to believe. and to help accomplish best in the world at everything we do. You know, so when people learn how to stop making scrap, that was heaven on earth for people who made things. You know, we used our brain, we don't have to make scrap anymore. And so these are really essential things, especially for a new leader to create a culture that supports what I believe people everywhere yearn for. You know, again, it's not a local thing in Pittsburgh. This is a global thing. Every place I've ever worked and been, all over the world, in the most unbelievable human circumstances, people yearn for leadership around the ideas of habitual excellence, you know, everywhere, not just in the United States. And so for me, you know, it's frankly aggravating to me that we can't get a more rapid spread of the idea of leadership's ultimate responsibility for seeking habitual excellence wherever they are, whatever they do, in everything we do around the world, because the difference between where we are and where we could be is leadership. That's my brief for leadership, Kevin.
Paul has said that he will take questions, and Lydia is going to be walking around with a portable microphone. So, anybody has something they want to comment on or ask Secretary O'Neill?
While you're looking for the first volunteer, I want to tell you a little anecdote about the Treasury Department. When I went to the Treasury, I had a transition breakfast with Larry Summers, who was secretary before me, at the Marriott Hotel on 14th Street and Pennsylvania Avenue. And I said to Larry, after we'd talked about all the high muckety-muck stuff about international finance, Larry, what's the lost workday injury rate at the Treasury? And Sheryl Sandberg at the time was his executive assistant. And Larry turned to Sheryl and said, do you know what he's talking about? I haven't got an idea what he's talking about. You know, so it turned out the injury rate at ALCOA was the national average. And in 23 months, by caring about it, we reduced the injury rate at the U.S. Treasury by 50%. Oh, and by the way, while they said, well, when I broached the idea of closing our books in 2.5 days, it was taking them 6 months to close their books. And they said, when I said to them we should close our books in 2.5 days, they said, you don't understand. There are government rules and regulations that prohibit us from doing this. So I said, you show me which ones and I'll get them changed. But there weren't any. So in a year's time, Ernie came down to help me again. In 12 months, the U.S. Treasury learned how to close its books fully audited in 2.5 days. So these ideas are not just about the private sector. These ideas are about universality in pursuing excellence. And I tell you what, the people of the Treasury were so proud of themselves that nobody else in the government could close their books in 2.5 days. The Treasury did. They did it. I didn't do it. I gave them encouragement and empowered them to use their brain. Yes, sir.
Well, first of all, thanks, Mr. O'Neill, for joining us today. My question is about ALCOA and International Paper Company being international organizations, and speaking to the safety is paramount ethos that guides these organizations. What are some of the challenges and and maybe highlight some of the triumphs of working in different countries where the values and principles and norms may not align exactly with what your company's idea of safety is?
You're basically asking about how do you get these ideas working in a country that doesn't value life?
Yeah, I mean, that's, yeah, sure.
You know, fortunately we have a Bill O'Rourke here. So Bill O'Rourke,
I think he had to just leave.
Bill O'Rourke and I worked together at ALCOA, and Bill O'Rourke was given a daunting assignment after ALCOA bought a very large facility in Russia where they took fatalities as an inevitability. And Bill O'Rourke caused this place to reach the ALCOA standard of an injury-free workplace. So it's interesting and you appropriately challenge what it's like in some other countries. So when I was there, we bought the Italian aluminum company that had been unprofitable for decades under the Italian government ownership. And so I said, as soon as we had ownership, I said to the people there, you need to have an injury-free workplace. And one of the things we need to do to get there is to stop serving wine at lunch. So if you want to know what unpopularity looks like, that's me. Okay, but I mean, there's data and analysis to support the idea that alcohol intake during work hours is not conducive to an injury-free workplace. And so we could bow to the local norm that this is how we do things here. When we bought Spain, there were people who actually resigned because they didn't want to wear a hard hat, really, because it was too hot. So would you rather lose your brain to a brick or be a little hot and uncomfortable? So if you really believe in a value culture, it's not negotiable, and it's not okay to say that's not how we do it in this country. If you have to compromise your values, I think you shouldn't be there. And I tell you what, underpinning this is something else that I alluded to. The yearning among people everywhere is for habitual excellence, even if they can't pronounce the words. So I've worked in a lot of different places around the world, all over Africa and all over Latin America, and in Russia, and and in China and India. If you scratch people deeply enough, there's a human yearning for habitual excellence, and real leaders don't accept the idea, well, we can't do it here. It's not an acceptable answer.
So thank you for being here. It's really an honor to have you on our campus, and I appreciate you sharing your time and knowledge with us. So I don't mean this to sound disrespectful, but from looking at your bio, it seems that maybe you didn't know a lot about paper or aluminum when you took those jobs. So I'm curious to know how important technical knowledge is for the CEO, but maybe more importantly, were you ever insecure about not having the knowledge or the technical knowledge or skill that some of your team did, and how you overcame that as a leader?
Yeah, it's a really excellent question. So I think it is really necessary in whatever you do to have an active curiosity. And in a way, it's a way, actually curiosity is a way to earn your way into an organization, because exhibiting ignorance that you like to erase is empowering for other people who can help to educate you, who won't have the willingness to do it unless it's invited. So I told a little story earlier about this curiosity thing. I'm a great fan of the idea of what I call a 5-year-old curiosity, because it's the most wonderful kind. It's not inhibited by somebody will think badly of me if I ask this question. So after I was Secretary of the Treasury, I went to one of my grandson's schools to talk to a third grade class. And after I talked, it was the time for Q&As, and this one 8-year-old, I think, held up her hand and said, you know, we've been told by the teacher about you were Secretary of the Treasury, and your name is on the money. And I'd like to know, how did you have time to do anything else if you had to sign all that money? Okay, that's what I mean by childlike, innocent questions. It's a way to learn things, and it's a way to earn your way into an organization. So I had something else going for me when I went to international paper. You're right, I didn't know anything about the forest products industry, but I had a real curiosity, and I did know how to do one thing that turned out to be really essential for them. I knew how to create an intellectual framework for analysis in a constructive, tied together way. And so one of the first assignments I got from the chairman there was, I want you to make a strategic plan presentation to the board of directors. This was February of 1977. In August, I want you to make a presentation. So I spent the intervening time working with other people that I had inherited in the strategic planning function. And we created a taxonomy, not just of the company, but of the entire world forest products industry, product by product, so that for the first time, when I talked to the directors in August, I could show them a specifics with data where we ranked in every product category, who the major competitors were, where they were. Nobody had ever put it together for them again. And from that day forward, they thought I was magic. Here's this guy who landed from the moon, and he's created a way for us to understand the world that we never had before. You know, and it was just me doing my thing. It's actually what I had learned in the 10 years I spent in the executive office of the president about how to think about complex public problems. And you know, the same skill set was useful when I came to ALCOA, because they didn't have that kind of strategic map of the world either. And in fairly short order, we were able to understand where we were and why, which is the basis for informed action. So it's not disabling not to know, it's disabling not to figure out how.